Welcome back. We're about to start turn 9 here. And turn 9 is what I think of as the beginning of the end game for a couple of reasons. Strategic bombing starts on turn 9 if the Allies are on plan. They will get the reinforcement because strategic bombers are never delayed, but they do need a base to go with it. So assuming things are on schedule more or less and the base is there, the Allies can start strategic bombing. And turn 9 is also the turn on which, if they haven't already, the Allies really need to start thinking about how they plan to win the game. Sometimes it's hard to spend too much time thinking about it before turn 9, especially if you're totally focused on getting your bomber base or whatever. But at this point, it's about time that we start that. So let's talk a little bit more about both of those things before we dive into card play here. Strategic bombing is important to the Allies for a couple reasons. It makes two really big contributions to the war cause. The first is that the hit provides a political will. What that means is that at this point, as long as they're out of danger zone on the political will track, they can afford not to worry about progress of war and still be okay. The other contribution from strategic bombing is card loss to the Japanese, and that's actually one card loss per hit. So on turn 9, the Japanese can lose one card, and turn 10 on, they can lose actually 2 cards. And so once they're potentially losing 2 cards from bombing, and at that point, subs are going to automatically hit for another card. So generally, at the end of the game, the Japanese are only going to have 4 cards per turn. And that really helps the Allies because you can never have more than 2 passes. Then what that means is the Allies will be able to go first and last, which really can help quite a bit. In terms of winning the game, let's talk a little bit more about the 3 different approaches. A blockade is caused when no Japanese ultimate supply source, which is one of the cities in the home islands up here, is able to trace a line of supply to any resource hex on the board. And a blockade victory occurs if that takes place over 3 national status segments. So basically, to win a blockade victory, you got to have that in place by the end of turn 10. And so here we are on turn 9. We've got 2 turns to make that happen if we're going to. There's really 2 critical success factors for a blockade. One is eliminating the Japanese ZOIs on the board, because obviously if there's any sea trace at all, then there's a failed blockade. So for example, Seoul is a resource hex, and so if there's a Japanese ZOI anywhere around here, and Seoul is Japanese controlled, then the home islands are going to be able to trace across to either Seoul or potentially through Busan. But the point being that as long as there's a Japanese ZOI to contest any Allied ZOIs and we can trace across here, then a blockade victory will fail up here. And obviously you can trace down to any of these guys here. So the point being, you got to eliminate Japanese ZOIs. The other critical success factor is that you have to have enough bases of your own that you can put in place a network of ZOIs that actually blocks the Japanese off. So you're going to have to take at least 2 or 3 bases along the way to do that. And to take bases, normally you're going to need to worry about the Japanese players' reaction stacks. And I don't know if I've clarified, but when I use the term reaction stack, I'm actually using it in a special way. I'm not referring to any potential stack of reacting units. I'm referring to specifically stacks that have a ground unit and a naval unit that can escort. And typically it's a 9-12 because by the time you get late in the game, the Japanese won't have much left. I think Yantero's got 1 brigade over here, that's it. So that counts as a reaction stack too, but most of them are going to be 9-12s. This is not a reaction stack because there's no naval there, but he's got a reaction stack here. He's got a reaction stack here. He's got one here. He's got them all over. He's got one here. This is not, these are all 18-12s. Remember, an 18-12 is too big because you can only use 1 ASP, but Nagato's got a reaction stack down here. So in order to take bases as the Allies, you have to worry about the Japanese reaction stacks because you don't want to go up against 2 steps. Going up against 2 steps means a lot of casualties, the probability of a failed assault. You just don't want to do it. So what you want to do is be able to pick a target. You can send 2 Marine divisions or a division and an Army Corps against the 9-12 with no problem, but only if you're sure that he's not going to be able to reinforce that. And so you've either got to be able to pin every possible reaction stack, or you have to take out the stacks by eliminating the naval. And he's got so many reaction stacks at this point that I can't, in general, I'm not going to be able to pin them all. So I'm really going to have to focus on taking out his naval. So to win a blockade victory, or to get yourself into a blockade by the end of turn 10, you really need to both take out his ZOIs and probably, if he's not under ISR, take out most of his navy as well. Let's talk a little bit about an occupation victory. That's basically occupation of the main island here in Japan, all these hexes. And you'll notice that all of them except one is a city. That means all of them except 3606 here has an intrinsic garrison with it. And the way the intrinsic garrisons work is that they are automatically the last step left in the hex after a bombardment. And so a key strategy if you have to invade Japan is to use air naval to take out actual ground units that might be in the hex. Right now we've only got one in Japan. It's the reduced 38th here. But what you're going to do is you're going to need to take out those ground units, actual ground units that are supporting the intrinsic defense, because if you go up against an intrinsic defense plus a couple of ground steps, your ground troops in Japan are just going to take too many casualties and you're not going to be able to be successful. So what you rely on is your air naval to apply enough pressure to take down the ground units so that your ground forces can then go after the 12-12 intrinsic defenses. But for that to work, again, the Japanese can't have air or naval that can react, that can provide support. Otherwise, you'll fail in your bombardment attacks. And so for an invasion and occupation of Japan, it's also critical to take out air and naval. In the case of an A-bomb victory, A-bomb victories are interesting because for an A-bomb victory, first of all, there's no guarantee. Obviously, it depends on how the cards fall. At this point in the game, you're probably not going to know unless you got really lucky and somehow on turn 8, both Tojo resigns and the Soviet invasion of Manchuria came out. That would be very unlikely. So you're probably really not knowing whether you've got a chance, and neither player is knowing whether there's a chance for an A-bomb victory or not, which is mirrors a little bit the historical uncertainty. And what that means is, as the Japanese player, you want to defend far enough forward and defend enough resource hexes that it makes it difficult for the Allies to take the resource hexes that they need to for an A-bomb victory if one becomes possible. But at the same time, you'd like to have the flexibility to pull those forces back to Japan fairly rapidly if it becomes later in the game or becomes clear that an A-bomb victory is not going to be possible. So as the Allied player, you'd like to be in a position where you can actually cut off those forces and make it difficult or impossible for them to pull back to Japan. And that actually puts you in a similar situation to a blockade victory in the sense that what you want to do is you want to take out the Japanese ZOIs and have your own so that the Japanese ground forces can't get through and don't have any escorts and so on. So again, you're in a position where you're looking to try and take out as many ZOIs as possible. So at this point in the game, it's normal that the Allies are really looking to try and eliminate all the Japanese air steps on the map as quickly as possible. Ideally, they'd like to do it by the end of turn 10 so that they have a chance at putting in place a blockade victory. That's sort of the general principles. Let's take a quick look at the situation here to get a better sense of what we're up against. For starters, if we look at ZOIs, you can see there are a lot of ZOIs here. In fact, there's about 25 steps or so of air units, and I'm including CV type units there. So anything with a ZOI. So there's about 25 steps of units with ZOIs here. I've got 2 turns to try and get rid of those. That's a lot of steps and not a lot of time. So that's going to be a real challenge, obviously. If we look at the opportunities for trying to put in place my own blockade, if I were able to eliminate his air steps, I clearly am going to need something. Either, I've got a ZOI. Let's look at my ZOIs here. I've got ZOIs down here. I would need at least a couple of bases here, but I'm also going to need something up here. I even will need to take Seoul, or I will need to put a ZOI up here so that he can't trace the line of supply from the home islands across to Seoul. So I've got to take several bases here, all of which at this point are defended, or nearly all of which it's possible. There's a couple of bases up here that we might be able to use, but there's not too many opportunities there, and so we're going to need to think about bases. But for the time being, the bigger issue really is I've got to go after his ZOIs. Looking at the track here, we ended last turn at political will of +2. With a bomber hit, I'm up to +3. That means if he does have Tojo resigns, he still can't win the game with it. So, and that means we're in pretty good shape for political will here going forward. Remember, we're up in positive territory for war in Europe, so we've got a lot of reinforcements. We'll come back to those. I'm now up to 5 ASPs, which is about 4 behind where I would want to be at this point in the game, but we'll have to figure out how to make do with that. Subs hit again, so he's down to 2 ASPs. I have 6 cards as a result of India being in revolt, and he's got 5 cards as a result of 1 bomber hit and 1 sub hit. So I've got 6 plus a pass, and he's got 5 plus 2 passes. That means, again, I'll go first, but he will get to play last unless something changes during the course of the turn. Taking a quick look at reinforcements here, more of the fleet reinforcements, and what I did was pretty much split them between Biak and Jolo at this point because I'm really wanting to be as close as possible to this part of the world. I want to bring Central Pacific out here at some point. I actually thought about doing it at the end of last turn and then realized that if I pulled him off, that Antero would actually have an opportunity, if he saw it, to put an air ZOI back into truck, which would be just enough to cause me problems tracing supply from southwest up here, and that would have meant an attrition hit on the B-29s, which would have reduced their chance of hitting, which would not be good at all. So I opted not to pull Central Pacific with a card last turn, but if I can, I'd like to do it this turn so I can probably put him someplace like Biak that's very centrally located. I ended up putting a couple of replacements in over here, but as we'll see, I'm coming more and more to the conclusion that I need to be spending all of my activations here in the Pacific if I'm going to have any chance of taking out his ZOIs. If I had a good shot at him over here, maybe I'd go for some over here, but I think I'm going to be better off trying to focus on the Pacific, because what will happen is as I take ZOIs out over here, they'll be forced to funnel them in from the CBI, and I can just continue to take them out. And it's more efficient over here because I get more activations, particularly the 3 on Central or the 2 on Southwest. Either way, it's better than the 1 I get on SEAC. So cards spent to kill units over here should generate more kills than cards spent on SEAC. Let's go ahead and pull up the hand that I drew, and you'll remember that I also put Axiom into the FO over here. And at first glance, this looks like a great hand. I drew 6 military events. I've got another military event in the FO over here. So you're thinking, okay, if the goal is to kill lots of units, 7 military events should help a lot. There's one problem with that, and that is that a lot of these are not really usable. So let's look more closely. Sand Crab. This is a great one if you have to retake the Aleutians, but if there are no Japanese in the Aleutians, you cannot use it as an EC. So this will be a 2OC. This is our recent friend Operation Tarzan that we spent as a 2OC last turn because it's limited to activating only ground and air units. That's fine in the CBI, maybe in New Guinea, but we're in the Pacific here, and I need my naval to go on a killing spree. And so Tarzan was not much use to me last turn as an event, and it's not going to be again this turn, so this is another 2OC. Quadrant. This is another 2OC. It's only air and ground units. I'm not in ISR. I don't need to get out of ISR. So I basically have 3 cards here that are going to be 2OCs. Axiom, again, this is it's restricted to Commonwealth and Chinese plus U.S. air, so that is likely to be another 2OC. So what looks like 7 military events is really 3 military events and 4 2OCs, and one of those OCs I can use to pull Central Pacific, and the other 3 we'll probably use to do some fighting with. Let's take a quick look at the events here. Toenails is a decent event, nice for ground attacks. If I can figure out where I want to do a ground attack with it, that'd be great, but not sure whether that will happen. It may just get used to go after air and naval. Operation Ash is a nice little surprise. It's only a 2 logistics value, however, and it can only be used on Anzac, so we'll have to see if we can figure out a way to use that with Anzac, again, to contribute to taking out ZOI. So it's a nice little card, but probably won't be worth that much just given the low logistics value on Anzac. And then S-Day, this is a really nice military event. It's worth 8 on South Pacific or 6 on Central Pacific. And it has this bonus that you can use the 11th Airborne Division. And I just happened to get the 11th Airborne Division. And of course, you place your reinforcements before you have a chance to draw your cards. So no idea whether I'm going to be able to use the bonus or not, but we'll have to figure that out. It'll certainly be interesting to try. Because I actually have one more card than Antero does, it's his choice as to whether he wants to play his FO card to go first, and he chooses not to. So I use my 1 pass, then he uses one of his 2 passes, and then I play my first operation. And I play Sand Crab as a 2OC, and I play it to attack Saipan. And the choice of Saipan is pretty straightforward. If I look at where I have, because it's an OC, obviously I can only make 1 attack, 1 battle hex. And so I'd like that battle hex to have the maximum possible chance of casualties. There are actually 3 steps here, 2 for the Yamato and 1 for Shikaku. So they're 2 good units and they're in the same hex, so I've got 3 steps as a target. So that seems like just a really good initial target here. And because it's a 2OC, I have to be coming in from reasonable range, and I'm using Central, so that means I can't activate these guys over here at Jolo. So basically I have 4 carriers and a battleship that are coming from Kwajalein, Rabaul, and Biak here. And so this is enough. One thing to keep in mind is he's got still a ton of kamikazes out there, so I have to assume now that we're getting this late in the game and with most of his kamikazes not drawn yet, that he's going to start having kamikazes in his hand and they're going to come out, and so I have to expect that I can lose some steps that way. But this is just to bring the maximum possible firepower to try and do as much damage as possible and put him in a position that if he does react, he's likely to just lose more steps because remember, it is, I think I forgot to mention this last turn, but we are in 1944. This is the second turn of 1944, and that means we get the +3 bonus for U.S. air and CVs. So with a +3 bonus, if there are U.S. air or CVs involved, the +3 bonus increases casualties in a non-surprise situation by, I think it's about 36% over no bonus. So it makes a big difference. Anyway, what happens here is that he fails to get intercept, and as with all 2OCs, you'll see the intelligence value is pretty low. It's a 2. And so that means that even moving into a ZOI, which I am here, I've still got a 50-50 chance of getting surprise. So that's the one upside to working with all these 2OCs is they've got more chance of surprise. And if I've got surprise, the +3 for surprise combined with the +3 for being in 1944 means I'm guaranteed to get a 1x result. And so these guys, for the first move of the turn, are eliminated, which is not a bad start here. We'll take that. He plays a sub here, hoping to take a shot at me on the way out, but that misses. And so in my PBM, send the battleship back to Rabaul just to pair it up as an escort for the Army Corps. That's where the battleship came from, actually, so I want to maintain that pairing. And then I take the CVs, and I can't remember specifically why I made this choice at the time, but I sent the CVs back to the Admiralty Islands as a base. That is a central location, certainly, but I don't remember what the specific reason for putting them there was. So that's the end of that operation. And then Antero chooses to use his second pass at this point, and so it's back over to me. For my next card, I want to try and just keep going in terms of taking out as many units as I can. I'm going for the double whammy. This is basically, as at Saipan, it's a ZOI unit that is also a reaction stack, so there's a double benefit here. And it's 2 steps, so that's good. Most of what he's got is just 1 step. There's 4 steps up here, but I'm not quite ready to go after those guys yet. So we're going after a 2-step ZOI reaction stack there. We are going to use Tarzan again as an 2OC there, so we'll have a 50% chance of surprise. As it turns out, though, he does make intercept, but with this force here, he chooses not to react. There's really no percentage for him with me having the size of force that I've got in these OC battles. Sending more steps, the chance of doing additional casualties on me is just not worth the losses he's going to take, because he knows that I don't really care about casualties at this point. I just want to take out as many of his steps as possible, and so he has to try to minimize that. So we take out the Amagi here, and then Bunker Hill goes back here, and these guys PBM. The rest of the guys all PBM to BX. Antero now has an opportunity to play his first actual card of the turn, and he plays Carrier Conversion from the FO, which provides 3 replacements. And so, having just taken out the reaction stacks at Saipan and Leyte, he goes and puts them right back. So a little bit frustrating, obviously. I've got 3 net steps that I've taken on him, because I killed 5 steps and he's replaced 2 here. And he put the 3rd step over in the naval replacement pool. But that's 2 reaction stacks that I thought I had eliminated that have come right back from the dead. Here I decide to use my surprise card, and so that is Operation Ash. It can only be on Anzac +2, so that's going to give me 3 activations. It says any air or naval. So I'm just going to go ahead and activate 3 U.S. naval. I'm not going to activate any ground at all here. So we play that as the event. And what I do is I'm going after 3 units that I can hopefully take out with lower value units of mine. I know we're not that far into the turn yet. He hasn't played any intercept cards. And so there's a good chance he's got one. And so what I am thinking I'm going to do is not risk first line units. I'm just going to put in some second line units, because they're enough to take out the guys I'm going after. So I've got Patan here, who's a 10 going after the Kaio there. And then I've got Bello Wood here going after the Zuiho. And I've got Wasp here going after the Junyo. But as it happens, he does in fact have a code change that he plays. And so that allows him to bring in some extra forces. So he brings in this 51st Air Force that came over from Okinawa to fight here at Saipan. He's got 2 supporting units here at Palau, and he's got a supporting air division over here at Leyte. And so what happens in these battles is that Bataan is flipped, and the air division there is flipped. It has to be the air division because he's full strength, and this guy's already reduced. Over here, this was a solid defensive play. What he does is Antero brings in the Tayo, which has a defense of 12, and these 2 units are both already reduced. Tayo is not. So I have to hit Tayo first, and with my 10 attack strength, I can't hit Tayo first because it's not enough. And so he's hoping that I'm not going to be able to hit anything here, even on a 1x result. As it turns out, I get lucky, I get a crit, and with a crit, you still have to kill a lower value unit if one's available. So in other words, I can't hit this guy, but I can hit either, because I'm a 10, my 10 can hit either of these reduced guys before hitting the Tayo, in this case, as a result of the crit. So what I do is I use that to eliminate the Zuiho, but unfortunately, Bello Wood is eliminated in return here. And over here, unfortunately, Wasp is also not able to do damage because he's an 8 and this is a 10 defense. And so I have to hit this guy first because he is full strength and the CVL is not, but because he's a 10 defense, I can't hit him without a crit, which I don't get, and Wasp is sunk here. So on the one hand, that feels like a not terribly good outcome because I traded 4 of my steps for 2 of his, but if you turn it around and look at the original intent was to try to kill 3 steps, I managed to kill 2 of the 3 steps that I was going for. Not exactly the same steps, but I killed 2 out of the 3 steps. And the fact that I took 4 steps in return from minor units is really not so much an issue here because, again, the whole point is to try and do as much damage as I can this turn and next turn. So if we look at ZOIs, because he lost the CVL at Palau, this air unit, which had started at Okinawa, ends up down here to try and keep his ZOI net whole, and everybody else pretty much ends up where they started. At this point, you'll see I've got 3 cards left, and Quadrant I'm probably going to use to pull Central Pacific. Toenails I think is going to go into the FO because I really didn't have a good ground attack this turn, and so I'm hoping maybe I can use it in a ground battle next turn. And so that leaves me S-Day to try and do as much damage as I can. And you'll notice with the 11th Airborne Division down here in BAC, you'll notice there's no air power there. And the reason there's no air power there is because there's 3 ground units. And the air support's being provided by the CVs. So there really isn't any way that the 11th Airborne can participate in the bonus. So we're going to play S-Day as the event. It's worth 8 on Southwest, so that's going to make it 10 in total. And I'm going to continue to do what I've been doing, which is to try and take out as much as I can. And if we look here, you will see that. So over here in Singapore, Nagato's 2 big steps, and it's a reaction stack. I'm going after that. Over here in Taiwan, there's actually 3 steps, and it's also a reaction stack, so I'm going after that. And then again, up here at Okinawa, it's a CV that's 2 steps and constitutes a reaction stack. And with my last activation, I'm just taking a cheap shot with the Marines, trying to go after the remains of this elite air division over here in Tarakan. So I'm really trying to do as much damage as I possibly can on my big event for this turn. Not thinking about using it for an invasion anywhere at all, because invasions really don't make sense right now until I can take out a lot more of his air. So this is his reaction, and let's just sort of play through briefly each of the battles. At Singapore, I'm going up against Nagato. I've got enough, well, on a 1X, I'm going to take him out for sure. I've got a +3, so the question is rolling well. Unfortunately, I roll a 1, and so all that does is flip him. He gets a half times result, which is not enough he would have needed a 1 times result to damage me there. So I did not quite achieve what I wanted to there, but 1 step is all right, I'll take it. At Tainan, we both end up with a 1 times result. That is enough for me to eliminate the Nachi and also eliminate not the SN, but the reduced 26th Air Force. He manages to flip Essex in return. So at this point, so far, I am 4 of his steps down for 1 of mine. So that's not too bad. At Okinawa here, Antero's given you another great example of how to play defensively in reaction. You'll notice what he did was, Taio was the CV that was in the hex. He activated it to move it out so that it was less likely to take damage. And basically he's creating air parity problems here for me because he knows that I've got 1 unit in the hex and 2 units at range, those air units, so I can only hit 2 units outside the hex. He's brought Hiei in from Tokyo, and he's brought the 12th AD in from Seoul. And what he's got here is he's got 3 units that are full strength units, and then the unit that's in the hex is a reduced unit. And so both of us roll a 1 times result here. I've got 44. The challenge is that I have to flip all of the 3 full strength units first before I can eliminate anybody, so that means I can't touch Hiei. But I can only hit 2 units at range because I've only got 2 range capable units. So I'm basically wasting a whole lot of firepower here, and it's because he played his reaction very smart. So what I can do is I can flip the Taio and I can flip the 51st Air Force. So I spent 22 of my 44, so I really wasted half of the damage that I did. And in return, he actually flips both Franklin and the New York here. So that was well played by Antero there, and a good example of how to do a smart reaction. And finally, down here at Tarakan, I get a crit, and Antero rolls low, so that's an extra step there that we get to take out with no casualties in return. So in my big card of the turn, I managed to take out 7 total steps, although I think only maybe 4 of them had ZOIs associated. And then I was gunning for 3 reaction stacks, and I really only managed to take out 1 of the reaction stacks there. This is the final PBM after that battle, and one of the things I just want to point out is the 12th Air Division, which had started out at Seoul, because I took out this entire stack, if we look at ZOIs, without the 12th Air Division in there, he's got a ZOI gap in here, which might potentially create problems. So at this point, he's decided to put the 12th Air Division back in there to fill that and make sure that he's okay. And then if you happen to be following in the log, one of the things I discovered as I did this is that I actually mixed up two of the battleships. The log says, and because everything is based on going forward, the log says New Jersey goes to EotS and Missouri goes to Jolo. In fact, it should have been the other way around. Based on range, Missouri could make it over here, and the New Jersey couldn't and would be going over here. But at the end of the day, it's each one is a full-strength battleship. They're same value, just the names are mixed up. So I'm going to leave it here the way it indicates in the log in case anybody's watching, so we don't get confused. For Antero's play, you'll notice that we've got 3 units here, 2 of which are actually full strength that have no ZOI over them. So he recognizes that that's an opportunity for me to kill free ground steps if I want to. At this point, not sure that I would, just because I'm trying to kill as many air and naval steps as quickly as I can. But he does make the decision to pull this guy out and bring him down, actually to Tarakan, so that he's now got ZOI coverage over those hexes there as well. At this point, I still have my FO card not played yet. I need to get a card into the FO, and obviously I've still got CPAC to pull. So the only logical next step is to pull this guy out of FO, and I'm going to have to use him as a 2OC here because he's only Commonwealth and Chinese units plus US Air, so he's not really good in the Pacific. But that gives me a shot to go after Saipan again and try and strip it. You'll notice most of his units now are down to, other than this guy over here, just about everybody's a single step. And I really want to try and take out as many of these reaction. Well, we're getting lower. This was a reaction stack, and this was a reaction stack. So we're starting to eliminate his reaction stacks. Anyway, I throw everybody in. I've got an extra air here for an extra range in case he decides to try and react, although I can't imagine he would. And over here, I brought up the first corps. That was sitting at Guadalcanal for quite a while, but I'm trying to get him a little closer to the action over here, so we pull him up to EotS. So that gets played for operations. This is, as a 2OC, he's got a 50-50 shot, and he fails intel, and it wouldn't really have mattered anyway. This guy goes down, and once again, we strip that air off of Saipan. And I just wanted to show you the PBM here, mainly because as I looked at the PBM, I realized that the whole reason for activating the LRB in that attack there was actually to be able to PBM him out. The reason I need to PBM him out is that we have another B-29 coming in as a reinforcement next turn, and there's no other base for him at this point. He needs to go to Marcus, and so pulling the LRB out, I now have room for one more, so we'll be okay to put the B-29 in at Marcus as a reinforcement next turn. Antero on his next card plays only one move, and that is Cayo, which he moves from Leyte to Saipan, and the purpose there is to reestablish the ZOI over Saipan. You'll notice he's on several occasions this turn, he's played a card to perhaps move only one unit and given up a lot of activations. Late in the game like this, it's not unusual as the Japanese player. You're trying to get your defenses just right, and you're adjusting based on something the Allied player has just done. And so don't think that you need to spend all your activations. Just basically, do what Antero's doing here, which is to identify a specific hole or a specific issue and deal with that, and don't worry about the rest of the activation. And then with my remaining 2 cards, we're going to play Toenails into the FO, that up here, and I also end up playing Quadrant to pull Central Pacific, so we play that. And so Central Pacific is going to go over to the reinforcement track here. And Antero actually has 2 cards that he ends up discarding because with me not doing anything else interesting, he doesn't need to respond. One of those actually is a code change, as I recall, and one of them is a kamikaze. So those are definitely nice cards for if you're the Allied player, they're nice cards for the Japanese player to be discarding towards the end of the game, because I know he's still got several of each left, and more kamikazes, I think, than code changes. So the more of them he can get rid of through discards, the less of them I'll have to face in combat. But that is pretty much the end of the turn here. Wrapping up the administrative stuff, I did convert the marshals by taking Eniwetok, and so the progress of war is made, and my political will stays at 3. It'll go to 4 when bombers hit again next turn. And because I pulled Central Pacific, we have to check for attrition. Pretty much everybody over here is in range of Southwest OK, even the guys up here, because there's no intervening ZOIs there. But these guys at Midway and the core at Oahu are going to get flipped. It won't really matter because I've got plenty of replacements to build them back up, but you do have to check for that. And as I said before, the reason I didn't pull the HQ the turn before was that I was concerned that it would be too easy for him to, with his ZOIs, to block the trace up to Marcus there. And if we check against my goals for the turn, which were to take out as much of his air as possible, you can see that the ZOI situation seems to have changed very little, if at all. I think I mentioned that he had about 25 steps of ZOI-capable units at the beginning of the turn. He picked up a couple of air replacements and a couple of naval replacements that came with ZOIs, so that takes it up to about 29. And he's got 18 now, I think, if I'm counting correctly. So I managed to take out just a hair over a third of his active ZOIs and in one turn. And so with only one turn left to try and get a blockade in place, it certainly doesn't look like I'm going to have much hope of doing that. But come back next time and we'll see what happens.